You just start.
Okay, I'm Leslie Yu. I'm the managing editor of ECNU Review of Education, and I will give us a very quick introduction to our journal. So we are ECNU Review of Education, that is East China Normal University Review of Education, and we are the first English education science journal totally sponsored by our university in China. And we were launched in 2018, and we are an open access journal. We have been included into the biggest open access journal database, the DOAJ. And also because we are totally sponsored by our university, so we charge no author processing fees. And we are very glad to, very proud to announce that though we are a relatively young journal, we have been indexed into the Scholar, Google Scholar and ERIC and the Scopes this August. And we are also preparing for entering affairs to be included into the ESCI. We have submit any documents related to this kind of application. And last but not least, although as a young journal, we are always, it is always our mission and priority to grow up and flourish with our young scholars. So that is why we would like to serve as a platform today to stimulate and enhance an interesting and meaningful academic dialogue like today. Okay, so that is my part. I would like to spare more time for our further discussion. Now, Wei Peng, I think it is your time to introduce some rationales about our special issue. You are muted, Wei Peng. You are muted.
Hello, everyone. A very good morning from Singapore. I'm Wei Peng Yang. I'm the guest editor for the special issue, Childhood Curriculum and Culture in Diverse Contexts. And I would like to welcome you all today. To address this very important topic, we will go over 3 sections, respectively chaired by Professor Marek Tesar from the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and Professor Hui Li from the Macquarie University in Australia, and myself. I hope our academic dialogues and knowledge exchange will help discover the values and realities about childhood and curriculum in diverse societies, especially those less represented in the English international academic literature. We are looking forward to rethinking the public system to promote culturally, contextually, and child individually appropriate practices, as cited from Professor Hui Li. Well, I need to make sure our meeting will finish on time. So shall we start from the first section about children's informal learning experiences, chaired by our co-guest editor, Professor Marek Tesar. Please, Marek.
Kia ora koutou. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, kia ora koutou, and good afternoon from Aotearoa, New Zealand to all of you. I would just like to really thank my co-editors at the beginning, Professor Wei Peng Yang and Professor Philip Lee, for being such wonderful collaborators and creating this amazing research issue and lineup of really stellar submissions and speakers, as well as Professor Wei Peng Yang just said, some of whom's English is not first language, really supporting really global and especially that kind of Southeast Asia Pacific region and the scholarship here. And my really great thanks to Dr. Yuli from ECNU, who's been really introduced the journal, and really thankful for the opportunity. And I have to say, as someone who edits another journal for Sage, I have to say that it's really great to see such a great example of work with Sage, and we've been watching this journal and really learning from your journey, and congratulations for your achievements, and really hoping that you will be only climbing in the ranks of a journal and being submitted your application for additional and other rankings to really create the top academic journal, which we really need. We really need journals like these. Without further ado, I would just like to it's my great pleasure to chair the first session. The session is called Children's Informal Learning and Experiences. And Dr. Wei-Peng Yang, who has created the order, has put myself as a first. So I will start talking now for, it's 3:30, we're right at time. So I will share my screen, if I can, right, here we go. Right, can you see my screen? Right, fabulous. So I would just like to say my presentation and my first talk is about Global Childhood's Local Curriculum, Rethinking Teaching and Learning Approaches for Young Children. And when I submitted my proposal, when I started to think about it, as you all know, researchers, you start writing your paper, preparing your presentation, and you realize there are things happening around you that you really want to say. And I'll take it as a journey towards creating a really full submission for a journal. I would also like to invite all of you to stay connected, and I put also my WeChat up there. So if you please do stay connected with me, and we can enhance further discussion even post-symposia. Unfortunately, we cannot be face-to-face together. We would have a lot of informal and other discussions where we could discuss both intellectual and also some academic gossip. But this time we will just have to really focus on short presentations. So first of all, as Professor Wei-Peng Yang said, the special issue is really focused on global approaches and really looking at different contexts. And I want to, as the only contributor really at the moment from New Zealand, I just really want to introduce some of the aspects of early childhood education from outside New Zealand. Early childhood education in New Zealand is a professional sector, which means is that we have qualified teachers. We have also experienced non-qualified teachers, and we have volunteers who are entering the early childhood sector. What that really means is that there is no mandate to have 100% of qualified teachers in our country. However, we have an aspiration to have at least 80% of qualified teachers, which is rewarded financially based upon the funding. And then there is up to individual kindergartens and early child learning center to deal with the 20%. And usually it's filled with experienced non-qualified teachers or with volunteers. And based upon all of this, we know that early child education really needs high quality thinkers and teachers. It needs a very strong, good curriculum development, and it needs a robust pedagogical practices. And I consider these three things as a really key, and I want to touch upon all of them. And I want to touch upon all of them in this very short presentation. In a way, I experienced year 2020. So it's a little bit personal and a little bit research-based, but I think that for all of us, year 2020 has been really life-changing in the way we experience scholarship, and potentially we were thinking about early childhood education, curriculum, pedagogy, and the need for qualified teachers. So I want to talk about all those three things. Well, first of all, I have to say just before I continue to the next slide that I'm from University of Auckland, and this is just example of the qualifications that you can study at University of Auckland, but this is indicative of what kind of qualifications our teachers would get in New Zealand. So you would have teachers with bachelor's degree, which will be enough, but there are a lot of them who would have graduate diplomas, which is basically 1 year upgrade to other qualification, and they would be qualified teachers. Or you will have postgraduate diplomas or taught postgraduate degrees, all the way to master's and PhD in early childhood education. And when you look at the landscape of teachers in Aotearoa New Zealand, you will see teachers with PhDs who are teaching children, as well as teachers who are only bachelor qualification, which creates, as you can imagine, really interesting landscape, where you have suddenly people being in the field, and you have a leader who has a bachelor, and you have a teacher on the floor who has PhD. And I think this is a really interesting example of how teaching workforce operate in Aotearoa New Zealand. Similarly, I have to touch upon professional development for early childhood teachers in Aotearoa New Zealand. This is something that's really important because it is an annual expectation for all teachers to have a professional development, but it's not mandated. It's really individualized and it's flexible based upon the needs and the feelings and the center and the way they want to specialize. But you know, what does research tell us about professional development? It tells us that first of all, New Zealand and Auckland has a very diverse population. If you've never been, I really would like to invite you, but when you come, you're going to learn that 45% of people who live in Auckland, for example, being born overseas. So you talk about very diverse population. And there are a lot of international collaborations to learn from each other, which I think that the work that ECNU Educational Journal is doing, and also the way the Professor Wei Peng has sort of put this special issue out there with us, it's really important because I see this as an opportunity to learn from all of us and to work collaboratively together. So the third aspect that I want to say about Aotearoa New Zealand that I think is really important, and of course many of you know about this, is that we are very proud of our national curriculum called Te Whāriki. Te Whāriki is a Maori word, Maori are indigenous people, and Te Whāriki referred to the woven mat. You can see the cover of Te Whāriki and you can see it sort of resembles the flax as it sort of sticks together. And it is our national curriculum framework that's been developed now, it's 25 years ago, I guess, and it was only revised very briefly once, and we are so proud of it. And we are so proud of it for two reasons. One of them is the vision of such a curriculum that talks towards a particular type of children. It talks about vision for children who are competent and confident learners. And I have to emphasize the word are, especially for those whose English is a foreign language. The word are reflects they already are competent and confident learners. They do not become competent and confident learners based upon their education. We take them when young children, their families enter early childhood setting, we consider them already being competent and confident learners. But we are there then to support them to really become communicators, healthy in mind, body, and spirit, for them to really create an environment that are secure in their sense of belonging, and they gain a knowledge through which they are able to make a really valued contribution to a society. The second point, apart from vision, is the point of what is curriculum. And there is, of course, we can have the whole symposium just around the question, what is curriculum and how it can be defined and what it is. But I think that the way Te Whāriki as a curriculum defines itself, I find absolutely fascinating as someone who studied a number of different curriculum frameworks. It talks about the curriculum as the sum of the total of all experiences. What that means is that curriculum are not just set parts, practices, outcomes. It's everything what the child experiences in and outside of early childhood setting, in a playground, in a classroom, while child's nappy is being changed, or while child's hands are being washed. Everything is part of the curriculum and everything is part of the learning. And part of the curriculum is also extended, of course, to the family and what's happened with whānau or with family at home. So we're talking about whether direct or indirect and environment that's sort of designed to foster children's learning and development. And this is very important. So this would be some of the things that I would say really create that understanding of where I'm starting in my presentation, what is actually that curriculum and what's the Whāriki. You can see its principles and you can see its strengths. So the principles are empowerment and holistic development, family and community relationships, while the strengths of the curriculum are really well-being, belonging, contribution, communication, and exploration. And if you look at the right, you will see how they are beautifully woven together. And the idea is it's a metaphor for learning. So if you woven all of those principles and strengths together, you create such a strong flex that it will hold everybody. It will hold all the teachers, all the parents, all the children, everybody. That's why it's all woven together. And I'm sure that a lot of different cultures, they have similar metaphors about how when you weave together particular things, you create much stronger foundations than if you take singular individual ones. So you can see that the idea of collective in education is becoming really prevalent in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, I love this image. And I have to say, I really love this image because it tells me something about early childhood education and curriculum and where we at. It shows 6 or 7 blind scientists who are examining an elephant. And each of them, of course, have their own individual truth. One of them is touching the body and claims it's a wall. The other is touching a tail, claims it's a rope, and so on and so forth. It's a beautiful image, and it creates a great idea about education. And that is, are we actually too close? Are we looking at just really individual, one tiny thing instead of stepping back and seeing the whole image, what is in front of us? Are we examining child just from very narrow perspective, or do we need to stand back to see that kind of whole holistic child? And this is something that I've been thinking about quite a lot this year, about this image and what's been happening in 2020, when, as we all know, we all ended up back and forth between education and home, and parents have become teachers at home, and schools were closed, and early child education were closed, and universities were closed. And it sort of really provided us, I believe, and what I want to argue in this short presentation, it showed us that some practices that we had for years and we haven't seen because we were so close, now we suddenly seen them quite in the naked eye, and we were able to point them out. Part of it is the language that we use. And I want to say, so I want to provide now 4 or 5 different ways how to talk about language. First of all, what language do we use really matters in early childhood education. So physical distancing versus social distancing. We talked about quite a lot in New Zealand, and I know this in other countries, about how we need to social distance from each other. But I would argue also, based upon these images, that we don't need to social distance, we need to physically distance. Social distancing create a huge problem. You can see on the picture on the left, you have 2 children that needs to be bear apart. I mean, those countries that don't have who are on a call and don't have bears like New Zealand, it's a quite foreign concept to us, but I understand that in a lot of countries, there are a lot of bears, and you will understand that bear is the biggest meter, so you need to stay apart for 2 meters. And if you are, and the same way, you need to think about how can you support each other, and neighbors are reading each other children's books that are on a balcony. And these beautiful examples of physical distancing, yet not social distancing, are really important. But a lot of government and a lot of organizations been calling for social distancing. And that I found highly problematic. Second part, what I want to say is, we have really focused in this past year on ICT and use of ICT in education. I think even people who didn't really use computers, Zoom, Skype, and so on, are now pretty much proficient in that. When it comes to young children, it's a little bit different. There's been always a question whether how much technology we need to have in our classrooms, and how many iPads we should have, and computers, and access to internet, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of studies around this. And I wanted to argue one point. I wanted to argue technology is absolutely fine, but it seems like at the end of 2020, as our children has, fortunately here in New Zealand, I know also in China, returned back to classrooms, it seems like technology has become this boom that children needs to have access to technology that's really important. And I do not want to contest that. What I want to argue, that research tells us that any kind of technology does not fix educational problems. It may provide some ideas, it may enhance learning, it may enhance curriculum, but it doesn't fix educational problems. We cannot, if we had educational concerns previously, they can't be just covered with the use of technology. Technology is just a medium. Second point is parent-teacher partnerships. What we have learned in past year is how important parent-teacher partnerships are, and how important parents' relationship with their own children are. We all know, I think it was Piaget who claimed that parents are first teachers to a child, and I think that they were first teachers to a child. As a father, I can say, you know, you are doing your work and you are teaching your own children at home. But at the same time, the collaboration between parents and teachers really benefited the child. And I think there is something to learn from this experience to carry forward, to really enhance our curriculum, to really implement it into practice. If this relationship can be strengthened and enhanced and build upon those experiences that happened. Place and space. What we really learned this year, from my perspective, it is that we do need place, space, and bodies in education. It was quite, all the virtual and online learning, it cannot really replace the classroom and the peer experiences for our infants, toddlers, and young children. You cannot have it's all good to talk about virtual hugs, but it's not good enough for our infants, toddlers, and young children. We need those bodies, we need these places and spaces in education. They cannot be replaced. Have we learned that technology is really useful? Absolutely. However, we cannot forget that the importance of place and space in education, of that learning environment that the curriculum talked about at the very beginning, is so important. And we need to really focus on our early child education communities. Communities are working together, supporting each other in a time of crisis. And we need to extend this into normal times. One thing that was absolutely amazing, and writing around this, is how communities in Aotearoa New Zealand during lockdown and really enacted the curriculum and really supported each other, and the way the curriculum was extended outside of the traditional early childhood setting. But now that the lockdown is over, the question is, how do we take that learning and bring it back? We cannot just take it as something that has happened. We need to think about what we have actually learned, what good has happened, and how it can extend our understanding. And the final point that I want to raise is, I want to trouble the idea of a new normality. There is something that I often read in editorials and articles, and that talks about that this is a new normality. This has happened, this will happen again, get used to it, this is a new normality. I refuse to accept that empty classrooms and playgrounds that are covered with a tape like someone was murdered there, like crime scene type, is a new normality. I refuse to accept that. It's abnormal. And by using the language, again, the use of language, this is new normal. We really are changing the discourses and the practices, how we're thinking about education. So I want to trouble that. And I think that the language that we use, and for us as an early childhood education experts and teacher educators and researchers, it's really important the language that we use around this. So the key lessons that we have learned is that we are still learning what a high quality curriculum could look like. We are still seeking for those pedagogical capabilities that will address that learning needs. And we need a high quality education and research on children, childhood's education, parenting, and well-being. We still do need more of that, as well as we now know after the lockdown that, and after this year, that early child education requires both philosophical and structural attention. And I think that's what Professor Weipeng and Professor Philip, they both sort of really beautifully written in the introduction to this special issue. This is something that's really important. To connect and to collaborate with all stakeholders nationally and internationally, which thanks to ECNU we can do. And we need a strong qualifications and meaningful professional development for our community, for our teachers. But there needs to be research informed, hopefully by the publications and articles that are published in this special issue. And one of my favorite images, we can't forget about social justice and the questions that we ask. Most of you will know this image, but I often want to be reminded of this because it reminds me of the idea of assessment and what we are asking, and how we may think that everybody had this year the same experiences. No, we didn't. And especially the youngest children, they didn't have the same experiences. They were the ones who missed those hugs and those places and spaces and those discourses and those key learning opportunities potentially the most. And I would like to finish with 3 quotes about education. I really am fond of philosophy. I'm a pretty philosopher, and I think that these 3 thinkers, philosophers, what they said about education are some of the most powerful things that I can think of. It's an Aristotle from old Europe who talked about that the educated differ from the uneducated as much as the living from the dead, which really speaks to the power of education that we need. It's a John Dewey, as we know, someone who is so well known in China, but also his pragmatic philosophy of education. And when he talks about education is not preparation for life, education is life itself. It's so important to think about it when we think of early child education. And Nelson Mandela from South Africa, who thought of education as perhaps the most powerful weapon, if you think about it, that can change the world and the work that we're doing. So I would like to finish here, and thank you so much for your attention. Please stay in touch, and I want to just ask Dr. Wei Peng, we should move to now next presentation, correct?
Yes, you are right.
So thank you so much. I will stop screening, and I would like to invite Professor Mengyu Feng from Warwick University to present her research, an exploration of the ways process drama may contribute to primary children's moral education in China. I will stop sharing somehow. Hold on. Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for kind introduction and your inspiring speech as well. Yeah, so now I will share my screen and we'll start my speech. Can everyone see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. So, good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you. I feel very much honored to have the chance to make a speech here. And my title is An Exploration of the Ways Process Drama May Contribute to Primary Children's Moral Education in China. So, this paper emerged from my PhD thesis with Professor Drew Winston as my supervisor. Influenced by him, I focus on how educational drama may promote primary children's moral development in the Chinese context. First, in terms of the research background, I divide the discussion of the moral codes taught in mainland China into 2 historical periods since the foundation of our country. In the first period, Chinese society may be considered to have been conservative and authoritarian. Impacted by the highly centralized government, the aim of school education was to cultivate mechanically obedient people, taking obedient or not as the measure of personal moral quality. In the second period, influenced by the reform and opening up policy, rapid social changes and developments have taken place in China. Accordingly, the self-identities of children are being treated more positively. Meanwhile, the government also tries hard to uphold the socialist nature of the school and society. The concept regulated individualism I referred to here indicates that children may enjoy relative freedom for their own development as long as it is beneficial to the nation's competence in the world. However, they are not expected to challenge the bottom line of personal freedom allowed by the government. Here, I summarize the opportunities and challenges for moral education course in contemporary China. In terms of the opportunities, Professor Lu Jie, a leading academic in the field of moral education in mainland China, Professor Lu argues that the market economy had shaken the foundation of the traditional society and made it possible to transform moral education fundamentally, and she believes that we now have the chance to cultivate self-determined, liberal, democratic, equal, and fair individuals as future citizens. Speaking of the challenges, the moral curriculum still cannot effectively help students develop the qualities needed nowadays, such as freedom, self-development, and independence. Besides, it has functional limitations with facing challenges of a transitional society, such as ethical conflicts between the past and the present, the conservative and the radical, the local and the global, and so on. As proposed by various scholars, only if the moral education in schools faces these challenges actively can it help China transform into a well-developed and mature society. Here, I provide some theories from the drama educators to illustrate drama's potential for enhancing children's moral development. As we can see, the drama approach could be imaginative, dynamic, and aesthetic. I have summarized 3 aspects of shortcomings existing in the current curriculum. First, the teaching materials tend to focus on real-life events, such as forgot to bring the textbooks, quarreling with classmates, and so on. Second, the current approach based on instructions indicates that the more truth is represented and transferred by an enlightened teacher to the pupils who are less enlightened. Third, to some extent, such a pedagogy is didactic. As we can see, these are the abstract moral commands for children to learn in these lessons listed above. Therefore, it is the aim of this paper to examine drama's potential to facilitate children's moral learning as an alternative approach based on imagination, dialogue, and construction. Based on these considerations, my research question is, in what ways can process drama contribute to primary children's moral growth in the Chinese context? As a trial, this project takes the workshop, The Boat, as an in-depth case study and attempts to offer an understanding of the possibilities of introducing drama in the Chinese educational environment. For literature review, first, let's take a look at what is process drama. According to Bowell and Heap, it is a form of theater applied within an educational context in which learners, in collaboration with the teacher, create drama for exploration, expression, and learning. Such a teaching strategy originated in the UK and has flourished in countries such as Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, and Southeast Asia, noticeably in Taiwan and Hong Kong. As a playful way of teaching, is based on the principles that human beings are playful creatures, and play is essential for learning and creative thinking. As key scholars in my research field, all 3 researchers inform my study. First, Leland's emphasis on community and working together fits well within the ideology of the Chinese social system. Second, I've learned from Adamson that drama has the capacity to generate dialogue and engage children's imagination to construct meaning together. Third, Winston's acceptance of Carol Gilligan's definition of morality as an ethic of care and his belief in seeing moral life as a form of narrative are illuminating principles for me. Case study was adopted as the methodology, and my research instruments include video and audio recordings, field notes and research journals, questionnaires, an individual interview with the head teacher and group interviews with the children. The fieldwork was conducted in a public primary school in Beijing, which has a specialty in teaching children sport and music. This school was chosen as it enjoyed the headmaster's support and a healthy ethos in a broader context. The 16 participants, they came from a newly founded drama society of this school and were students from grade 3 and grade 4. The questionnaire showed that none of them had heard of the story nor experienced any process drama work before. Here are some illustrations from the picture book, namely the boat. It tells an old man lived alone with abandoned animals on a hill. In the villagers' eyes, he is unreasonable and ill-tempered. Only a little boy regards him a warm person. As he sees the old man treats his animals patiently and kindly. One day, the rainstorm arrives. The boy rows a boat to save the old man and his animals. Influenced by him, other villagers try best to help them as well. In the end, the old man gets moved and returns back to the community again. There are several reasons for choosing this story. First, it is imaginative rather than realistic. And second, it explores the concept of community, which is a typical issue in domestic moral education, and children are usually taught to respect those who have contributed to the collective and be well behaved in public spaces. In contrast, this story portrays an isolated man who regains acceptance of the community. Therefore, I'd like to compare the drama class based on this tale with children's normal moral sessions. Third, in this story, a child embodies a symbol of hope for a better future, and for this, I'd like to share it with my students. The drama scheme was mainly based on my supervisor, Professor Winston's work. Due to time constraints, I will introduce 3 activities with underline in the following section. For discussion section, I will analyze 3 aspects that drama helped to enhance children's ethical development. First, I will examine how imagination enabled them develop empathy. In one activity, children were asked to imagine the old man's past. I started with the sentence, "Once there was a little boy, nice and friendly, until something happened and changed him." According to the children, the boy came from a poor family and had no friends. A gang invited him to join in to steal money, but finally betrayed him. It was the disappointment that made him live on his own. Besides, they were also invited to imagine how the old man might treat the villagers. In the salesman's eyes, a little monkey always sits on his shoulder, looking offensive and screeching noisily. And there was one occasion the old man used a counterfeit bill that the shop assistant refused to accept. However, he was beaten by the monkey on the hand, and his master left without paying. According to the doctors, the old man would sometimes spit on the floor of the hospital. And in the circus manager's eyes, the old man always got angry when collecting injured animals, as he thought people were too cruel to these creatures. For the gravekeeper, they thought the old man was quiet, usually wearing black clothes, and he never replied to any of them. The imagining and the sharing of these stories are important. In developing them, children have been emphasizing with somewhat different in age, situation, and experience from themselves, achieving this through their feelings of common humanity. As revealed in Boy Lampert's words, at first he disliked the old man, but he then felt sorry for him, as he suffered a lot in the young age. Besides, he also developed empathy for the villagers, and he wished more people could see the old man's kindness, as he could be moved and become a better person. Here's the second part of the discussion, namely shaping ethical selves through dialogic thinking. As the most dramatic moment of the story, the boy demonstrates great courage as he rows the boat across the flood to save the old man and his animals. To capture this dramatic tension of the journey, children were given the chance to experience the boy's ethical struggle in the form of a conscious ally. I invited Boy Giraffe, this boy wearing in blue, to perform the boy and walk through the conscious alley, while the others chanted various reasons as he passed. This group is the positive carry-on group, and this group is the negative turn-back group. They chant the reasons such as, carry on, you can save lots of lives, or turn back now, or you'll be dropped. Don't turn back, animals are in danger. Dangerous animals may hurt you, and so on. When sharing his feelings and ideas, Boy Giraffe admitted he became confused when hearing various voices. At first, he thought if he were the boy, he would definitely rescue the old man and the animals like his hero, the Monkey King. But when other classmates reminded him the villagers might not welcome them at all, he was totally confused and wished to flip a coin to decide it. According to Winston, a conscious ally may help children experience the complexity of a moral dilemma. In this incident, Boy Giraffe admitted to confusion in his mind, as stated by Maxine Green, naming, articulating, affirming the confusions and contradictions in our consciousnesses, we may be able to choose ourselves as ethical in unexpected ways. The final aspect of the discussion is exploring moral concepts in specific contexts. The final activity of building up the raft helped the children reflect upon how the flood brought the old man and the villagers together. In the story, the villagers build a raft from everything they have available to them, such as old tin bags and barrels. In my class, children were reminded of this, and each of them was provided a piece of blank paper to write a short letter to the old man, convincing him to be part of the community in the name of the villagers and using their words or drawings to form one piece of the raft. After that, I encouraged them to think about what qualities of human beings could connect each other, which would be the ropes to tie different pieces of the raft together. Their answers include kindness, devotion, care, responsibility, and so on. I wrote them on pink paper stickers to tie up all the 16 letters to form the raft, which was named by the children the raft of community, as shown in this photo. In Go Panda's piece of raft, he wished the old man could have a safe journey and feel warm when seeing the candle, the candle and the smiling face. The left part of her drawing showed her understanding of a good community, which had flowers and people worked hard as the bees and took care of the community attentively. The headmaster, Mr. Zhao, observed my class and shared with me his observation of another moral lesson in which the teacher taught the children to line up in public places, after which the children all nodded their heads and the result appeared to be successful. However, when the class was over, the kids piled up again at the exit as usual. Compared with that, he thought, this drama class achieved better effects. In light of the evidence, process drama may provide specific contexts to promote children's autonomous moral thinking and inspire them what an ethical life might be. As argued by Neeland, stories and play in drama classroom can better help children to comprehend abstract thoughts as they offer concrete examples and detailed situations connect with human experience. I am aware that this study is a small-scale, qualitative piece of research, and there might be a danger in over-interpreting its findings. Therefore, I am necessarily cautious in my conclusion. But in light of the evidence, I believe that the drama approach can be seen to some extent to promote the pupil's ethical imagination, dialogic capacities, and autonomous thinking abilities. In terms of the limitation, this study can be seen as most pertinent to teachers who work with small groups in the form of a drama club or society as an extracurriculum activity. However, I'm aware that different issues and problems will emerge for any class teachers who may wish to incorporate drama as part of their ordinary curriculum. Speaking of this suggestion, it might be interesting and valuable to explore how local stories can be reinterpreted through drama, such as The Magic Paintbrush, The Legend of Naja, and The Adventures of Mulan. This is the reference of the paper. That's all for my speech. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.
And thank you so much, Professor Mengyu Feng. It's now my great pleasure to introduce to you Professor Shen Luo from Shaanxi Normal University in China, who will present us his paper called Young Children's Learning in a Public Space in Chinese Urban Area. Professor Shen Luo, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for Marek and Weipeng to organize such a wonderful opportunity, and thanks for the ROE team that we can still connect with each other at this very difficult time faced by all of us. I feel very great and honored to speak to you from the ancient Chinese capital in Xi'an, and really hope to see you sometime after the pandemic goes away, and maybe someplace in Shanghai or somewhere in the world. And now I'm going to share my screen to you. Okay. Just a second. I've got. I have to reset my privacy settings. So okay.
We can see your screen, Professor.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so I edited and changed my screen a bit. So from it's more about urbanized view to see childhood and public space. So can you see the screen now? I just double check so people can see it. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marek. So as you can see, I've shown two pictures, small pictures in the lower part of the slide to show you the so-called pocket or community garden in Chinese urbanized area, which is newly, I would say, very recently urbanized area in China. Before that, it was still countryside. So the urbanization process, which took place during the past decades in China, has definitely has changed people's life and people's way of thinking, and it also has for me the pedagogic implication to children's learning and to the way children live. Like for my personal life, 3 generations ago, for my grandparents, all of them, they are from the countryside. They speak the local dialects without any knowledge of Mandarin, and they mainly live on the farmland before they move to the cities. And for my parents, I think they still have the strong legacy of agriculture society and culture. For example, they would really like to save money, and they like to do everything themselves, and they are taking good care of their family members, their parents, and also their siblings. And for me, the second generation after my grandparents moved from Chinese rural area to the urban area, I can see the continue, and I would say the break and the continuum of the agriculture life. And now the Chinese government has proposed a kind of new type of urbanization. And this kind of new type of urbanization is not only to, I would say, build high-rise buildings and blocks, but also they propose a human-centered urbanization, which means urbanization should focus on humans and should aim at improving people's life in the urban area. And so in my research, I took the newly urbanized area in one city of China as a window to see how this kind of new urbanization took place and how this influenced children's learning and life. So at the very beginning, I would give a definition of public space in my context and in the River Ball area. I'm not giving you a fixed definition of public space. Rather, I would provide some perspectives and aspects of public space, which is situated in my context. The first aspect is public space may be and may not be entirely free. So for some people, public space is accessed by everyone, so it should be free. But in my context, I would argue public space in some contexts may charge a small fee and open to some certain group of people, but still people can mingle with each other. They can hang out and talk with each other in the space, and they can still produce a specialized culture for this small group. Also, in the public space, there will grow a sense of identity of the community in the space. So it's pretty much like a garden, and all the community members are like grass and flowers. They flourish in the public space by getting the nutrition. When I say nutrition, I mean the people's interaction with each other, because my theoretical perspective derives from the symbolic interactionism view. So for me, people's interaction, people's culture, all the rituals are like nutritions, which nurture people's life and way of thinking. Also, the public space may be material because you can see the concrete garden, the buildings, and the equipment. But also, in some sense, it is social and political. When I say social, because people come together even though it's a time of pandemic, because to some extent China has relieved the pandemic after the spring, so people can still come out and without social distance or physical distance as Marek proposed, they can still come together and hang out in the public space. And so it's social. But I would also argue it's political, because from my research, I can see there are significant class and class differences of people's activities and way of spending or purchasing in the space. So I think those three perspectives are what I give to define public space. For example, we can see in the first picture I showed, it's a traditional Chinese tea house. It's pretty much like the pub, which you can see in the Western world. And that is actually one of the most visited pub when I was studying in Edinburgh in Scotland. It's called Wall's End, but actually it's not Wall's End, it's Wall's Centre, because it was situated in the Royal Mile, if you ever visited Edinburgh, and with a lot of locals and tourists alike. And people come together to talk, to learn from each other. So actually pub is more like public space. So it's more like a short term of public space. And in Chinese tea house, it has similar functions. And in this picture, I demonstrated the very traditional way of people's social life in Chinese rural areas. It's still very common in Chinese villages, and the mainly elderly people come together at the center of the village, maybe under a tree, to get some shade from the sunlight and to socialize. And the second picture is actually the quite recently urbanized area. It was a village before, but after the area was urbanized and after the new buildings were built and the space were kind of decorated, people still have still inherited their way of life to come to the village to talk. And in the urbanized area, now, because of the new type of urbanization proposed by the government, there are children's facility and equipment in this area where children can come together with their guardians, not necessarily parents, because I would say a lot of the guardians are actually grandparents, because parents may go to a faraway place to work for a better pay. So a lot of them are actually grandparents. But this gives the children an opportunity to come out of their flat, to meet their neighbors, which is really important for children's social learning. So in my research, I did an ethnography. So I chose mainly three main sites of the research. One is a community garden, or you can call it pocket garden or whatever. The second one is a local museum, which opens pretty much 7 days a week and a whole year, except Chinese New Year. And I also want to observe in the children's corner in a commercial mall, where parents go shopping and maybe did other entertainment activities, and children can go with their parents and maybe relax and play in the mall. So those three sites are where I conducted this research. The aim of the study is to provide a theoretical and methodological framework that serves to capture how public space and people's interaction within it can influence children's learning, and mainly informal learning process. And this research is still much in the developing stage. So I will just report the recent progress to you, so I can hear your opinions and advices to make this work better suit this special issue. And 3 questions defined my directions of the study. The first one is, what are children's main activities in the public space in River Ball? And the second one is, how did the urban public space influence children's learning in this area? And the last one is, how did children's guardians, preschool teachers, and staff working around this public space make sense of its pedagogic implication on children's learning? And for the specific methods I adopted, it's mainly participant observation, which is the main tool for ethnography. So I was using the public space as well as other children and their family members. I rest, take a break in the garden, and I chatted with my friends as well as my respondents. And I also use the equipment for my own exercise. So my own position is both an insider and an outsider. I'm both a user of this area, of this public space, but also I'm trying to conduct my research, leave some distance with my respondents to find out what their activities are. This ethnography took about 10 months, over a year. It's mainly last year and the beginning of this year. And I took about 1 visit in each of the sites per week. For the ethics, I got the consent before interviewing children's guardians, preschool teachers, and staff members who are responsible for maintaining the space. And I also anonymized those involved in the research and make sure people's face will not be included in the data I collected. And the theoretical framework I adopted is mainly from following the ethnographer Mead and other contemporary researchers like Abdul-Rari. So interactionists understand the space as a social category. It's not a concrete physical space, but also it's a setting, it's a background of human experience. And spaces, just like objects and human beings, they are socially alive. And it features their own identities and personalities. And interactions underlie the importance of social norms and dynamics in shaping individuals' meaning-making process should be acknowledged. And it also prioritizes people's contextual interactions in their day-to-day life. As a result, space convey symbolic, material, and essential features and can influence people's experiences in it. So I'm going to share some of the findings from the research so far, which I termed as urbanization of childhood in public space. Because the community garden was open to the public and about 3 years ago, after the apartment block were completed. The owners of the flats or the apartment were mainly the previous peasants who were working on the lands, but now the lands are largely transformed to the block buildings. And during this urbanization process, one of the important way for the government to compensate the farmers, because the farmland is how they build on their livelihood. So they can get several flats after their lands were used by the government for the high rise for the new buildings. So they can still move back to the area where they belong to. And many of the older generation still stay in this area and take care of their grandchildren, while the younger ones left home to work in other places. So the community pocket garden were pretty much like a village center area where people can hang out, but in an urbanized context. So the grandchildren can play. So the first site, the community garden, is one of my main focus. And the second one is the museum room, and there's a public museum space where children can have some workshop every week. But when I interviewed the museum staff, and many of the workshop were mainly attended by the families and the children of the museums, and the local respondents, the local residents, they have no idea of the activities which happened in the museums. That means actually the proximity of the museum does not link the public space with the community well. And there are still local and non-local differences between public space in River Ball. And the third one is the children's area in the mall. And children have to pay a fee to enter this area. And I call this commercialized way of socialization for children's life. So 3 themes came out from the initial analysis of the data. The first one is the urbanized rules. For example, in the community, some children, they actually want to pick up the flowers during their visit to the gardens, but they were stopped by their families, by their family members, because these kind of rules must be learned by the children, and it's one side of their urbanization process. Also, children developed urbanized taste, especially in the urban mall. This kind of taste is mediated by commercial activities, and also the public space offered a sense of urbanized family life for the children and their family members. And this kind of urbanized way of life or childhood, however, is not recognized or fully tapped by preschool staff. During the interview with the staff, they really conducted visits to the public space in their communities. So even though in the curriculum, we proposed that the curriculum of children has to be close to children's life, but in reality, the preschool staff did little to connect the public space in the community with their curriculum. So that may be the gap we can bridge later with the preschools. So that is some pictures of the old childhoods shared by the kind of parents or grandparents of the children in the area. But now it's different. It's kind of commercialized, more kind of formalized equipment which define the children's childhoods. And I hope I can have detail more in the article, which may be critical to reviewed by all of you. So that is some stories I shared from my research. Thank you.
Kia ora, and thank you so much, Professor Shin Luo, for your wonderful presentation. And now it's our time to have a discussion. Shall we, Professor Wei Peng, do you imagine that now there's going to be questions asked and so on?
Okay. Thank you for all the speakers. I really appreciate all your efforts and the contribution to this special issue. I just would like to invite Professor Hui Li as the discussant of this session so that he can share his insights on all of your presentations. Let me check. Yeah, okay, great.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
You can hear me, right? Okay, hold on. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, but not your slides.
Okay. Can you see my slides?
Your
Hello,
interface,
testing,
not
testing.
currently not yet the slides.
How about this moment? Is it okay now?
Great.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for inviting me to be the discussant of this session. It's my great privilege and my honor. And so glad to hear 3 wonderful studies, and found that many great minds are there today. And I have quick summary of points you have made, and I'm going to give my ideas about the topics. And the first paper was delivered by Professor Marek Tesar, and I'm so impressed because Australia and New Zealand are sharing the same qualifications and diversified profiles of teachers and diversified population. And the hierarchy curriculum is a wonderful framework in the world, well known. And of course, it's localized. It's a kind of typical postmodernized curriculum. It's also globalized curriculum framework. And it's very classic indeed. And Australia has been influenced by New Zealand framework. So in the year of 2009, we published the early years learning framework, the being, belonging, and becoming. We learned something from New Zealand. So according to Professor Tesar, curriculum is the sum total of experiences, activities, events with an environment that can foster young children's development and learning. This is kind of mainstream view about early child curriculum. However, I'm going to challenge this statement later in my following slides. And I'm going to give you my explanations about why I'm challenging that idea. And I like the cartoon Professor Tesar used in his presentation, The Elephant and the Black Man. Indeed, I prepared my slides using the same metaphor. I'm going to show you my cartoon, okay? So it's a kind of great minds think alike. And we are so close, yes, indeed. New Zealand and Australia, we are so close. And I'm very glad to hear that so many important factors have been raised. For example, the teachers, teacher qualifications, curriculum, ICT, space, place, and community. All these factors are influencing early childhood curriculum, early child development, and early child learning. And also, I'm troubling with those new normal during the lockdown of COVID-19. So I also agree with Professor Tesar. I'm troubling the new normality, the normal versus abnormal. However, this gives us a good chance to do some thinking, writing, or researching into the early child curriculum in the globalized era when a lockdown is input by COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a good chance for us. When there is a crisis, there's a chance. So all of us could think what we can do with this kind of good moment or sorrow moment, okay? And the second paper, Dr. Feng Mengyu has presented a very interesting study because, you know, drama education is very seldomly studied in our research. And I do love drama study because it is beautiful to young children's learning and development. And do you know why? Because according to Vygotsky and his followers, the age between 3 to 6 years, they are the golden age for pretend play, social play. And pretend play and social play are the nature of drama. Drama education can promote early social development and moral education, that's for sure. Okay, we are not doubt that. And I'm very impressed that Dr. Feng classified the moral education in China into 2 major periods, the closed-mindedness period and the regulated individualism period. That's very interesting. And she mentioned the educational functions, the three types of drama education functions: imaginative, dialectic, and constructive. And this is a wonderful framework for our teachers and education researchers to rethink the value and the functions of drama education. Of course, he has mentioned the functional limitations that has facing the transitional challenges, including the ethical conflicts during this period. And process drama is a very interesting method of learning and teaching in primary school years, even preschool years, because the teachers and students could work together in and out of the roles. And you know, Warwick University, that's where Dr. Mong got her PhD. Warwick University is very famous in the world for its drama and drama education research. There's leading research in the world. And so I'm so glad this study could be included in this special issue. And I found that she has set up a triangulation of video, field notes, interviews. However, I do have some questions for you to rethink. First, so what are the psychological and educational mechanisms of drama education and its effects? How and why? So I try to push you to think in two questions: how this drama education could improve young children's moral education and moral development. And the second question, why it can improve their moral understanding and moral level. So the two questions you can be highlighting in your manuscript. And I want to highlight that even drama itself could be curriculum. So curriculum could be everything, and drama is another kind of curriculum. And I want to share with you my writing about this. In your slide, you mentioned that story and narratives may be the best approach to learning and development. That's correct. So in the year of 2007, I published one Chinese book in Oxford University Press, and that is about story approach to learning in the years, theories and practice. So in that book, I mentioned that story is the best approach to learn. And I want you, if you can, highlight the cultural influences in your study. I understand that Chinese students and teachers might have different views about the play and social development, moral education. So if you analyze the data and report the results, would you mind differentiating the cultural difference between Chinese student teachers and those British student teachers? So this is my feedback to you. And the third paper, okay. Third paper, I'm so glad to hear Luoxin's study because we met in Hong Kong many years ago. Now he's working in Shaanxi Normal University, a young scholar and promising scholar. So this study is very interesting, has touched an unstudied area in early childhood education, that is the public space, the urbanized public space. So this kind of participatory ethnography study is well done. 10 months, okay, on the side. That's not easy job indeed. So the focus of this study is on the new type of urbanization of childhood in urbanized China, and focus on human beings and their people's lives. So the public space is very interesting. I agree with you. In China, public space might not necessarily be entirely free. Some public you have to pay. Yes, that's true. So it's interesting. And you use the tea house and the word stand. I found that the end of the world is the Scottish and British favorite words. I went to Scotland, England, and Ireland. I found many places called the end of the world. So that's maybe their favorite word. And the garden, the museum, and children's corner in the mall, the three sites are very common and popular in today's Chinese young children's life. So I want to suggest 3 T's to you to rethink, to highlight your findings, or to reframe your findings. The transitional, transformative, and transferred. I found that these newly urbanized children and their families, they are living a transitional life, a transformative life, and a set of transferred rules, tastes, and norms. So this kind of thing reminds us this is a remarkable and larger social campaign and reform on the earth to urbanization in China. Thousands of millions of people are losing land and moving to town, and they're changing to the urban life. So this urbanization has been impacting the aspects of every child's life. And this kind of study should be well cited, but when you do your study reporting, please also highlight the interaction between the globalization, localization, and urbanization, and pay attention to the cultural influences. Okay. So here is my word and my thinking about the 3 studies. The first one, I'm urging all of you to reconceptualize the word childhood. What is child? What is childhood? Childhoods are socially situated, contextually defined, and culturally shaped. And I'm trying to believe that children, they are the co-constructors of knowledge. They are not our targets or subjects. They are the co-constructors of knowledge. They are the co-builders of curriculum. They are the co-conductor of pedagogy. They are the master or the co-master of early learning and development. And we have to reconceptualize the term curriculum. Since the year 2007, I've been studying the curriculum matters in early childhood years, and I published one book. In that book, I listed the popular definitions of curriculum. For example, number 1, curriculum is socially, politically, and culturally embedded. Number 2, curriculum is textbook. 3rd, curriculum is teaching plan. 4th, curriculum is experience. And 5th, activity. 6th, target. 7th, social culture. And 8th, autobiography. And at the end of the book, my conclusion is that I'm so sorry. Curriculum is undefinable and the definitions are unlimited. So could be everything in our art. Okay, then we have to rethink the one thing, that is, how about the global childhood? How about the local curriculum? Are there any conflicts between the 2 things? The one direction is going beyond local towards globalization. The other direction is going deeper into local context. It's a local curriculum. So are there conflicts between the 2 different directions? Yes, I think so. So when you present your paper in this special issue, would you mind thinking about the globalization, the globalized childhood, and their impacts on localized curriculum? And why, given the background of globalization and globalized childhood, the curriculum all over the world are still localized? Edgar mentioned my 3 caps framework earlier this morning. Yes, the 3 caps could give you some answers, or at least a strategic framework to interpret the conflicts. And the first cap is culturally appropriate practice. So we need to make our curriculum appropriate to the society. And the second is the contextual appropriate practice at the school level. So we have to make a curriculum appropriate for the specific school. And the third one, we have to make our curriculum appropriate to everyone, every child. So the three caps can give you some basic ideas about why curriculum today is still localized. And the next recontextualization is culture. Culture, in my eyes, is a kind of underground river that runs through all your lives and relationships, but cannot be touched, cannot be visible, cannot be seen from normal eyes. So you have to use some other technologies to find this underground river. And culture is always changing, and at times, it is unconsciously and powerfully changing. And I do believe that culture defines our ways of thinking and making meanings of the world, and the learning and development, how we think, how we perceive, and how we deliver will all be influenced by culture. So here I introduce two concepts. The first one, the cultural relativism. This school of people, they believe in that every culture has its own value system and uniqueness, and there is no one universal culture. The so-called American standard is a famous brand for toilets, not for earth education. Okay? So the second one, that is what we want to critique. Cultural universalism. This kind of people, they believe in that there is a kind of universal values, and there's a kind of best culture that should be and could be followed by all nations, such as so-called American standards, American culture. Sorry, whenever I see this word, American standards, I remember my toilets. I'll use this elephant to show how bland all of us are. So the elephant in the room is the target, is the learning and development, or is the childhood, or is anything we want to study. So we have at least 3 blank men in this room. The one man maybe focusing on the curriculum. Yeah, curriculum is the most important thing. We have to focus on curriculum. And the other one is talk about, okay, childhood is more important. I like childhood. And the third one, maybe culture. I prefer culture. So I do believe there's a fourth man should be in the room, and it's the context. So in this room, we have elephant, a black elephant, untouchable or invisible. So what we are talking about is the part we have touched. The untouched parts are out of our visibility and missing in our mind. So it's a pity. So I'm so urging you to rethink in this special issue, how can we include the 4 blank men in the room to touch the elephant together and to communicate between each other, to incorporate their views and perspectives into a whole picture. That is, we have to pay attention to the 4 C's, the context, the childhood, the culture, and the curriculum. And as a summary of this discussion, I have some views to share with you. The first, there are multiple realities of childhood all over the world, and there are multiple perspectives on the curriculum, and there are multiple educational practices across the societies, and there are multiple cultures around the world. So multiple contexts, multiple cultures, multiple curricula, and multiple childhoods. This is what you need to think and write for this special issue. Thank you. And questions? Edgar, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Professor Lee. I'm not sure whether the chair, Prof. Tesar, have any comments or questions.
How would you like to thank Philip for such an important comments and really summarizing all the talks and speeches that were said today? It was really well summed up and really brought the whole session together. And your connections and your really innate, especially a context, culture, and in childhood as well, Professor Philip.
Any questions? Thank you. Thank you.
So can I check with Yoli, like when will this section be ended? So I want to check if there's time for questions from the speakers.
All the questions from the audience. I see were any questions from the audience? Not yet, right?
How about like, do we have time for speakers?
Yes, we still have maybe 20 minutes, right? According to the agent.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. That's good. We can discuss.
Okay.
Yes, so we have time for Q&A. Actually, personally, I have questions for Meng Yu. So I'm not sure, like, yeah, Meng Yu. So I have one question. It's a simple one about, have you considered to use a Chinese drama or a Chinese story for your activity?
You mean have I already used?
So
no.
when you conducted your research,
yes.
Did you consider a Chinese story for the research?
No, not yet. For my doctoral study, so in total I used 3 stories. So they are all from a foreign culture. But when I conducted the field work, when I taught the stories to the children, I translated them into Chinese. Yeah, but in my future research, I will maybe use more traditional, our own stories. Yeah, for the children. Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would appreciate if you can use some more local stories. Yeah, for Chinese students.
Yeah, the children, they also expect, to maybe enjoy more our own stories. I'm looking forward, to teach that, to enjoy that teaching experience with them. Yes. Thank you for your question.
So the floor is open for any questions from our participants. So just feel free to raise questions or to give comments.
Yes, Edgar, maybe Dr. Feng Meng Yu and Luo Xin, they can ask me questions. If you really need more input from me, I'm open now. Yeah, you can ask me any questions about your papers, because you are chosen for the special issue. We expect you to submit high quality papers. Our ROE is wonderful. It's a brilliant new journal. In the following years, I'm sure ROE will be a high impact factor for sure. And now it is listed in the Scopus. And in the following years, you'll be ESCI, Emerging Source of Citing Index. And so I do encourage you to submit the best part of your thesis to this special issue. And your studies are wonderful, very interesting.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Yeah, I will try best to improve the quality of my paper, and it's my great honor. Yeah, I can have the chance to publish my paper in our journal. Yes.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, same from me. I'm going to produce like as best as I can a paper to the journal. Can I also ask a question? Because for me, I use a lot of sociological studies to support my work, and because IOE or our special issue is still it's educational and it's early childhood educational journal. So what do you think of that? Can it be like a lot of more like sociological rather than sort of pedagogical? I think that's a balance I have to strike, you know, because now it's for me it's more like ethnography, it's more sociological, but I want to connect with preschools. Do I have to do that? Is that necessary?
It's your study is a typical sociology of education study, and it's a kind of cross-disciplinary study that is involving two subjects at least, sociology and education. By nature, your study is wonderful. But when you revise or write your paper, please highlight the education elements. Then do data analysis and discussion. Okay, Professor Derek.
Yeah. Oh no, sorry. I just please continue. I just wanted to also say something after you. Just go.
Please.
Yeah, please. I'm done. Your turn.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Professor Lee. I apologize. I didn't want to interrupt you. I just was raising my hand. That it's just all New Zealand habit to raise your hand. You know, whether you're in the classroom or on the Zoom. So
that's great.
When you want to speak.
Good habit.
Professor Shinluo, I just have to say, I really enjoyed your paper and would really like to encourage you read utilize some of the childhood studies literature. So childhood studies literature is really based in sociology, and I mean, I don't promote my own work, but 2 years ago with colleagues from Monash University, we did the whole study on urban nature and young children for the environmental education journal as well, which sort of deal with similar all the way children. But I absolutely agree with Professor Lee that while the ground is sociological and you're thinking based in child studies, education, all of it has a pedagogical impact, a particular way how you can discuss the associated pedagogy associated with that. Now, one way how there are multiple stakeholders come to education. I really appreciate for running, and I think that there is so much merit, and I would be very happy to, as one of the editors of a special issue, I'd be very happy to work with you. So I think you're on a good track, but but you shouldn't be losing pedagogy of your mind. That's just my.
Thank you, Marek. Thank you, Marek. And for some of thank you for your opinions on my work, but I think I lost some words because of the connection. So maybe I can email you afterwards and to ask you.
Oh, please do.
Because of the connection, I think I can't really got 100% what you said, but I'm sure that's everything.
I apologize about the connection. As Professor Lee knows, Australasia is almost on holidays, and so I'm also on holidays at the family holiday house. So the connection is really not very. That's why I'm actually coming into the well.
Understandable. Yeah. Yes, understandable. You know, Australia has the same problem because we are suffering from the poor internet connection because our Prime Minister rejected to use Huawei technology. So the whole country is suffering.
Marek's connection is unstable again.
We can't hear you.
Actually, there's a question for Professor Lee from the chat box. Sorry,
Yes.
Marek, we were losing you because just now the connection was not good.
Okay, thank you. I got the questions from Dr. Fong, right? Is that a question from you, Dr. Fong?
Yes.
Okay, two questions. The first one, so many curriculum models imported from Western cultures, such as Montessori regime in our high school. Yes, I have many papers talking about this topic, and you can refer to my website, Google Scholar and ResearchGate for full text, and I can give you a quick answer. Yeah, that's a good idea to learn from the other side of the world. So Chinese people are very humble and very good spirits of learning from others. So in the past 100 years, Chinese people have been learning from other countries. From time to time, the first beginning, for example, 100 years ago, we learned from Japan, then America, then Soviet Union, then America, then the other countries. And now, 100 years later, it's time for us to introduce all achievements and curriculum models to others. So that's the time for us to introduce ours, okay? So no problem. And we learn from others because we want to go beyond others. So that's the first philosophy of Chinese people. We have so many philosophies. One of Chinese people's philosophy is that only we learn from each other can we go beyond others. That's wonderful. So that's we stand on the giant's shoulder, then we can see farther and more than others, and that's okay. And second, you said, do you think it's possible to include children's participation? Yeah, why not? You know, in European and early childhood education, children's voices should be heard is a common belief, okay, shared by all the scholars. So in Australia here, we have the same thing. New Zealand, Australia, we also highlight that when you do study, you have to hear young children's voices. So we promote triangulation of participations. For example, when you do studies, you have to include child, their parents, and their teachers. So the third parties or the stakeholders should be involved in your study. Then you can get a triangulated perspectives and data sources. And the views will be different. So that's triangulation. With triangulation, we can have exact number of the height of the Mount Himalaya, just announced last week. Okay, so Luoxin, any questions?
I think I'm good now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And you can use my framework if you want to improve your paper. Thank you so much. Professor Chen Chong here. Do you have any comments or summaries for us?
No, actually just some observations. The first one is I think Marek's picture of the elephant and the blind man is more artistic than Philip's. But the Philip's picture is better adapted to your framework. The first observation.
Good observation.
Yeah.
Good observation.
I think I agree, but both of them are equally important.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. The second one, I just want to some related to Luoxin's reservation is about more sociological than educational. I think that your papers have a quite great potential to theorize this kind of new phenomenon in Chinese context. In this urbanization. So I agree with Professor Lee's suggestion that maybe you can highlight what this kind of a new phenomenon and this kind of a public space perspective could contribute new or innovative insights to the current discussions. Yeah, especially in this, if the children they cannot stay, they will not stay at home, they will not do online. So there is some place they have to go. So I think there is a potential to theorize. So I look forward to reading your paper. And last one is just for this guest editors. Maybe I think that have already kept very good conversation and have already got this dialogue. So maybe I would urge the guest editors to think how to frame or how to try to make this kind of internal dialogue between among the papers more visible in your editorial, or even you can think about some commentary, commentary, invite some commentaries. Yes. So I look forward to reading and to this special issue is very inherent, this dialogue, yes, among the papers.
Wonderful idea. Yeah, wonderful idea. We'll do that. We'll do a very good editorial with the 3 giants, okay, in this field, okay, or elephants, okay, 3 elephants together. Okay.
You can put the 2 pictures there.
Yes, why not? Yes, why not? Now, before we go, there's another last question. Sorry for this. This question came from the audience, Chen Feng, okay? She asked whether importing those Western curriculum models are culturally appropriate. For example, Montessori, Reggio Emilia. Okay, my answer is that yes, the models imported from Western countries may not be directly culturally appropriate, but you may find from the results that all the curriculum models have been transformed and adopted, adapted, and justified and changed. So finally, the so-called implemented curriculums have been changed and totally localized. And Dr. Yang Weipeng, he's going to do his presentation in the following sessions, talk about this. That is the ideal curriculum model, the expected curriculum model, and implemented curriculum model will be different. So you can find from Chinese practice that all imported curriculum models have been transformed and have been localized and totally different from the original model. So that's why some scholars in China are challenging this phenomenon, saying that, oh, this is not Montessori, this is not Reggio Emilia, this is not high scope. Then I ask, why should we be a totally purely authentic high scope? We don't want to have authentic one. We really need a Chinese duplication of that curriculum model. That's what we want. Why not? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Weipeng. I think we can call it in the end for this morning section, and let's look forward to the next 2 sections this afternoon. So the audience, please stay tuned with us this afternoon. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dr. Marek Tesar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you.